Hello, everyone, dear listeners. Welcome to another episode of Outside the Studio. My name is Tessa Tovar. I am your host. For those of you who get the privilege of watching online, you'll notice that my kitty has just joined me. This is a Beha. She conveniently shows up whenever I am teaching or recording a podcast. So today I'm so delighted to welcome Amy Weintraub. First of all, Amy, I feel so honored for your time, that your willingness to be here with us. And I'm super excited to talk about your latest creation, which is Yoga for Your Mood deck. And this is 52 ways to shift depression and anxiety. And I can't tell you how many times throughout all the many teacher trainings I've done and just my own personal learning have felt like I need a deck of cards that I can just pull from when I'm feeling like I need some help or support. And then you magically showed up for me. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks
It's
for
been
being
kind of a life work, this accumulation of practices into the deck. So it represents all the things that have really helped me on my journey and helped my students and trainees. And in some ways, it's a collaborative effort because years ago, when I started the Life Force Yoga practitioner training, the people who came for their second level and became mentors would share how they were using the practices that I taught them initially with their students and clients. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
so those practices, they shift and change over time because we wanted to make them as accessible as possible. Because many times yoga teachers, yoga therapists are called upon to teach in secular settings, non-yoga settings like treatment centers and recovery programs and mental health uh, groups and sometimes recovery groups. So, in all of those settings, people are there not to do yoga. They haven't chosen to be there for yoga. So we know how valuable these practices are. So to be able to really make them accessible, that was my goal in creating Life Force Yoga, for mental health professionals, for yoga teachers, and healthcare professionals in general. And then also to make them accessible for people who would never think of going to a yoga class. So that's what really makes me happy about this particular deck, because it has the Sanskrit in the parentheses, but we call things by other names other than something like Analoma and Viloma Krama,
Mhm.
which can immediately be off-putting to someone who's not steeped in the depths of yoga and yoga practice.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you're kind of alluding to the seed of this creation, but I wonder if there was a moment in time where you were like, I know I need to create this deck for this specific purpose.
Well, it was actually before the pandemic began, um, that I really thought this. My whole goal has been to, since I wrote Yoga for Depression, which was published a number of years ago, it's still, a best-selling yoga book, but the only people who are going to pick it up for the most part are people who are already sympathetic to yoga.
Mm.
And so I really wanted, as I expressed, something that would be that would reach people where they are. And I wanted it to be as diverse as possible, to include members of the BIPOC community. And I worked with this wonderful illustrator in England, Juliet Percival, and sent her pictures, and I just want to show you this because I love the cover. I love the
Mhm.
picture. It's the cards are diverse and different body types,
Mhm.
different shapes, different ages. So no one feels like they can't do it. And it's not the practices are accessible, just as the practices in the book Yoga for Depression and Yoga Skills for Therapists are. And the thing that makes me happy is that, I was my personal story is that I was depressed. I was a fiction writer, and although my short stories were published years ago, and I actually was a television producer as well. We don't want to go there because I did not lead a yogic lifestyle and suffered from it, an anxiety-based depression, which I self-medicated. And when I found yoga, my life really changed. I was able, with the support of a psychiatrist, to slowly titrate off my medication after beginning a 8 or 9 month nearly daily yoga practice, which really supported my mood. So it's been a life's journey to find the practices that worked for me, and then to begin to share them. When I did my first yoga teacher training in 1991, and my passion was to basically steep myself in yoga, and because it was a month-long training, and I just thought, oh, all I'll do is yoga, and I'll breathe and do the pranayama, and I'll feel fabulous, because I was already feeling pretty good at home doing my daily practice. And I came out of that training really hot to teach, to share what had really transformed my life with so many people who may still be suffering from anxiety, depression, a history of trauma, which I also had. So I just feel like that once I started teaching what was authentic to me, it was embraced, completely.
Yeah, I so resonate with that as a teacher of yoga myself, and the journey over the past, for me, it's been, well, I've been a practitioner of yoga since 2001. So 20 years now, and I've been teaching yoga since 2015. And so I just so resonate with what you're saying. And also it's just evolved so much over the years. So I'd love to get your take on, you said something really key, how you could take what you learn and really teach what is true for you. And so, and I imagine that's evolved so much over the years, right? So I'm curious about what your practice looked like when you first started, if it was a daily ritual, and how it's evolved over the years. What does it look like now?
Yeah, it's, as your practice changes, I think, environmentally with the seasons. I mean, mine does. Where I am on the planet, depending on, the light, when the sun rises, when sun sets. And with age, with your own body's aging process, it changes. And just with I should say, what my enthusiasms are. And like you, I have done, a number of different trainings. And, it's like I don't not love all of it. They all of the lineages of yoga, all the schools of yoga, they all have something to offer. So personally, I started doing transcendental meditation years ago.
Yeah.
And I got my mantra when I was 19 years old, along with my father and brother. We all went together, and I had a practice. I went to the, what was it called? The Creative Science of Creative Living at University of Massachusetts, a month-long sort of training to be with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And as long as I was practicing meditate, and when we do rounding weekends, and also that during that month-long training, we were given sheets of yoga poses. So we would go back in between the meditation sessions and practice yoga from a sheet, I've never been good at reading maps. So it was a little like, what am I supposed to be doing here?
Uh-huh.
But that was my first exposure to doing asanas, not led by anybody, but just
Uh-huh.
doing it from like handouts.
Uh-huh.
And then I as long as I practiced the meditation, I was feeling pretty good. But the depression broke through. Life, happens, and there was postpartum. I had given birth, and there a lot. I wasn't meditating as regularly, and not. And when I went back to my meditation practice, it just wasn't enough. Um, and I was in psychotherapy. I was on medications. So my actual asana practice didn't really begin until I went to Kripalu for the first time in the Berkshires, Kripalu
Mhm.
Center. And that was in 1989. And I started practicing. We were on pink, fluffy blankets. We didn't even have yoga mats back then. There
Mm.
were yoga mats. I mean, yogis didn't have yoga mats back in India. That
Yeah.
was a sort of an evolution of yoga. Anyway, we practiced these asanas, and it included at Kripalu. It included pranayama, included meditation, it included chanting. So I was getting the full package of practices. And I would go home. I lived in Rhode Island at the time, and I would drive up to Massachusetts, about a 3 hour drive, and I'd go home with video cassettes or audio cassettes and plug
Mm.
them in, and I would practice daily because there were no teachers in Newport, Rhode Island, where I lived. And I started volunteering up there and going to programs. And so my practice began as a sort of Kripalu practice, which was always including pranayama. And and then separately, kirtan chanting.
Mm.
So not chanting within the poses or anything. And then what I noticed is I started to incorporate some of the bija mantras, the seed sounds, into my asana practice. And it just enhanced it so much. And then I started incorporating more Kriya breathing when I needed it. So I would get on my mat, and some days I just didn't. I was still, just coming off of a lot of my. I had eventually titrated off the medication after 8 or 9 months, but there were still days when I did not feel like practicing.
Mm.
And I would plug in somebody else's tape at that point and let them lead me. And then 5 minutes later, I'd be pressing the off button and doing my own practice, which really consisted of basic hatha yoga asanas and pranayamas that included Ujjayi, Durga yoga, 3-part breath, and Anuloma Viloma, which is an alternate nostril with a holding pattern, and then alternate nostril breathing, and some Kriya breathing too, Kapalabhati, and some other Kriya breathings that were even more intense than Kapalabhati that involved belly rolling and all of that. And it was my medicine. It was literally my medicine every day. And that's pretty much what I did for years, adapting it to the season and to what my body felt like it needed. If my body felt sluggish and tired, I would start in the supine position. If my body felt, and then build the energy. If my body
Mm.
felt revved up and nervous, um, rajasic, we call it, I would start in a standing position and work my way down. So I
Mm.
was always sort of playing with and making it my own. And when I became a yoga teacher, I started incorporating some of what I did for myself with my students, and they loved it. A lot of people came to one of the places I taught in Tucson, where I live now. This was not, I started teaching in Newport, Rhode Island, but when I started teaching at the Tucson Racket and Fitness Club. So people would come in, 18-year-olds to 80-year-olds, some of whom were carrying their tennis rackets, just coming in for a stretch to warm up for their tennis games. And I would have the whole room chanting grounding, lum, 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 and share pose, and, rum and warrior rum, 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 rum. And they learned yoga with sound. And they assumed that that's the way it was supposed to be. It wasn't just Amy's yoga. It was like, this is the way yoga is. So I'd have a sub and they'd say, she didn't use any of your sounds.
Mm.
So it was like using things that really made a difference in my life. And when I became a yoga therapist and started working with people one-on-one, people really, and working with kids with autism and kids on the spectrum, the sounds and the breathing practices were really what resonated with people. And I know I'm going far beyond your question right now, so you can stop me, but I wrote a chapter a couple years ago with Helga Kramer, who's one of the world's most prolific yoga researchers. He's in Germany. It's a chapter called, Yoga for Depression. It's in a book called Yoga for Mental Health. It's Handspring published it. And in that chapter, he provided the research, and he had done survey research of all the literature, and he found that the most profound aspect of what changes our mood is the breathing practices. And some people can't breathe, so making sounds enable them to breathe. So it's the pranayama and the toning, the mantra chanting, while practicing the asanas, that I think is the most efficacious for working with mood.
Oh, I love this. And I want to pull on the thread of mantra a little bit more and using the voice. And this fall, I changed my schedule to include a class that is actually called movement mantra and meditation. I don't see it anywhere else. Many public studios that I've practiced at, it's hard to find mantra inclusive in our traditional, well, not traditional, in our modern day yoga classes, at least where I'm living. And so what I'm noticing is that it seems like there's a shyness or a hesitancy for students to use their voice. And it often starts off very timid and quiet. I can't really hear anyone else. I'm not sure if they're even doing it. And so I'm wondering what that's about. Is it like a cultural shift? Does it feel like, I don't know, does it feel like cultural appropriation to some people to use these Sanskrit words? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are to use the tones that have been given to us from Mother India, and to make it, there are two aspects of why I had 80-year-old, 83-year-old Dorothy, who was a good church woman, good Christian woman. Her whole life revolved around volunteering at her church. Not politically aligned with me, but I love Dorothy. Chanting these tones. I had, 24-year-old Rose, who came to me, who's now the director of Life Force Yoga, chanting for the first time. All these folks who'd never chanted before. And here's what the two aspects that I think are important. One is my enthusiasm, how much I loved it, and how much I could share that it has changed my life, to add this vibratory tone. The second is, especially when working with people with a very strong right brain, who are very didactic and need, the evidence, is to talk about the evidence, to talk about the studies, so actually I'm going to add a third thing. So there are studies. There's a 2017 study, there's a 2011 study, and there's at least one other study that I'm familiar with that shows that mantra chanting, and in fact, in my book, Yoga for Depression, there was an older study from the 90s that Luciana Bernardi did in Italy. These show the vibratory effect, how it stimulates vagal nerve activity, how it puts us in that ventral vagal state, that rest and digest, social engagement state, activating parasympathetic, calming the sympathetic, the fight or flight. So there's a lot of evidence. So I can talk about the evidence a little bit and just say, and the other way I approach it when I'm talking to people, either individually or as a group, I've worked with a lot of people and they have found this particular practice of using the tone, and I might not say chanting, using the tone of lum to be very grounding, or zoom to be energizing for the second chakra, that seed of self of sensuality, sexuality. We all need that little revving up sometimes. And if you want to calm it down, use the cooling tone, for example. I would say, I'm just giving you an example. Ooh, ooh, to soothe and calm that second chakra at the pelvic region. So, I just integrate it like that. And I would say many people I've worked with have found this to be effective for whatever it was we were working with, for their mood, for depression, for anxiety, for soothing that revved up state. I'd language it appropriately to the people I was working with. And so there are a lot in the Yoga for Your Mood card deck. There's a lot of these practices that either calm the sympathetic nervous system, meet that rajasic mood, which is that revved up nervous state, anxiety, we might call it, and bring it into a calmer state. And there are practices that meet that sluggish, lethargic state and bring it into a more revved up, energized state. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to have to link to some of the articles that you mentioned in terms of the science, the science-backed evidence that mantra or vibration or tone, however we want to refer to it, really does work. I believe it. I felt the power of it. I use it in my own practice, and I definitely feel like you do that I want to share it with others. I want to dive into your deck a little bit. There's so many amazing practices in here. I find it so accessible. I love both the images on the front. I don't know if you can see that very well. my screen's a little washed out. I'll link to pictures of this in the show notes as well. But so there's an image on the front, which is, visually very stimulating, and then a description on the back. And Amy, I have a couple of questions. Yeah, yours is way better. So if you're watching this online, you can see Amy's images. Would you, number one, tell me what maybe your 1, 2, or 3 favorite cards are, and be willing to demonstrate 1 or 2 of those exercises for us?
I would love to. So before we do that, one of the things I want to say about the instructions is that anytime we do anything energizing, like for example, this one, which is, I call it the power hara or the power breath, we always ground it. So the instructions include directing awareness, which is like a mini yoga nidra, mini body scan, which brings us back home to the body. So we're not up in, too much stimulation. And then we ground it with a breath. You'll notice me leading whatever I lead that way. And there's one other thing I'd like to say about the way the cards are organized before we actually do it, like my favorite. And that is that you can pick, of the 52 cards, you can pick something that just like sort of, okay, I need a little recharge. I've been sitting at the computer for 3 hours or 2 hours, whatever it is. I need to get up and do something. I need to move. So you pick a card from, let's say, the red color-coded cards, like this one, let's say.
Number 5.
And then, that's number 5. And you use that card to meet the mood that you just want to energize. You don't need it. But let's say you're really depressed. And although this card, number 5, would be great to do, it's energizing, you're probably not going to feel like doing it. So you meet that mood with a blue card. So a calming, a calmer card. And then as you deepen the breath, say through stair step breath, which is actually analoma prama and analoma viloma, analoma and viloma krama, excuse me.
Say that 3 times fast,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Tongue twister.
Much easier to say stair step breath, although
Yes.
there was a lot of sibilant S's in stair step
Yeah.
breath. But anyway, so we meet it and then we build the energy so that we're not, if you tell someone who's really overstimulated to just take a deep breath or even watch your breath, it's just not going to happen. There's just too much going on. So you need to meet it and then ground it and then move into something that's calming. So I think I will, let's see, since I pulled up 5.
Also, one of my favorites, Breath of Joy. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Breath of Joy was from the Kripalu tradition. It was brought to Kripalu by Leela Osterman, a German yoga teacher trainer who was the first yoga teacher trainer in the early 70s. And the way it was taught back then, because everybody was 18 to 24 coming off drugs and alcohol, this was the era of free love and drugs, sex, and alcohol, right? I mean, that's just, or whatever that is. Anyway, so everybody could do all these things. But now that yoga is being done therapeutically, so many people who don't have yoga journal bodies are practicing yoga. They're doing it for therapeutic reasons. We need to adapt, modify. And Swami Shivananda said something. He said, adapt, adjust, accommodate. That's the most important thing for doing yoga. So I'm going to stand up and move back, move my chair, and you're welcome to stand or not, because you can do this in a chair too. You can do the arm movements and the breath.
Yeah,
so we're
I'm
going to
stay close to my mic and follow you.
Sure.
From the chair.
So, okay. So here's what, so the way Kripalu did it was an inhale, inhale, inhale up, and often really fast, and then throwing the body forward. Not so good for the lower back for folks, who have maybe degenerative spine disease, which I have, or other anomalies. So we do it with chair pose. So it'll look like this. Inhale forward, it's a 3-part inhalation. Inhale to the side. Inhale up overhead as much as possible. Make it accessible. Exhale into chair pose. So my knees are bent. I have shorts on. So anyway, my knees are bent and my arms are back into a chair that way. So, and then we'll add the sound lum, which is really grounding. So we'll do it slowly. We'll do a few rounds and then notice what happens after we do it, okay? So inhale forward, inhale to the side, inhale up, exhale, ha. So we'll do ha first. Inhale, ha. Inhale forward, inhale to the side, inhale up, ha. Now let's add the sound lum. I'll do it sideways. Inhale forward, inhale side, inhale up, lum. 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 Really emphasize that L. Lum. One more. Lum. Beautiful. And then if you're standing, close your eyes. If you're seated, close your eyes. Let your palms open. Sense the energy you have awakened in your face, your palms, your left palm. Feel the tingling perhaps in your left palm, the fingertips, the spaces between the fingers. Inhale through the fingertips of your left hand, all the way up your left arm to the crown of your head. Exhale down through the right side. Sense the face, arm, fingertips. Inhale up through the fingertips of your right hand to the crown of the head. Exhale down to the left side. Inhale from your feet to your crown. I am. Exhale to your feet. Here. Grounded. Ready. Inhale from your seat, if you're sitting, to your crown. I am. Exhale to your seat. Here. Grounded. Ready. And then allow your eyes to flutter open. And if you're standing, you can come back and take your seat. So what that does, I should first of all ask you how it landed for you doing it in a chair, and how did it land for you, Tessa?
That's a good question. I've actually never done or not lion's breath, breath of joy in a chair. So I found it different. I definitely prefer performing that breathing exercise standing up. Although I do have arms, like
Yes.
armrests that I was trying not to knock over in my mic system. So I'm sure I could have rearranged to make it a little bit more freeing.
Yeah.
I do love that we incorporated the seed sound lum. That was also something I haven't tried with that before. And I do feel more grounded right now. I also feel it's like there's it's not just grounding. It's like an ability to tap into an internal confidence, I think, that I get from using my voice in a way that is powerful, unique to me, but also something that we do in community. So we create a safe space together too, right? So yeah, those are the things that I'm noticing. How about you?
Beautiful. Well, beautiful observations. Well, what I feel often, and even when I'm leading it, is more spacious,
Mm,
more room inside for me, for whatever it is that I want to embrace and bring into my life, to breathe through my life, whether it's clarity or love or, you know, more focus or peace. There's more room inside to breathe it through. And so often, and you spoke to sort of that sense of um, empowerment, that sense of grounded, more than grounding, you said, but more like an inner strength and
mm,
that kind of knowing. And so many of our Life Force Yoga practitioners use this in residential treatment facilities where, like domestic violence shelters, where women have lost their voice. They can't. So this is, and or people in recovery programs or mandated jail release programs, so that it gives them their power to, because many of those folks have suffered tremendous abuse to bring them to the point where they are just being released from jail. So it, and they've had their voices shut down. So to have a, a powerful practice where they feel strong, and we sometimes even include bhavana or imagery, like bring into your heart's mind an image for strength, which let's see, I don't know if I have that. Yeah, I do. I think I have a card out that I'd like to do this because
yeah.
it's using mantra visualization. It can be done in a chair. So this is card 9,
Okay.
and this is Rashida, who lives in my building, who is the model for this.
Oh, I
Uh,
love that.
yeah. And so what we're going to do is first, I'll show you the gesture,
Hmm.
and then I'll instruct. So we're going to be inhaling the arms so you can see, out in front of the belly. And then as we exhale, we'll draw the hands to the belly with Maha Ra.
Okay.
Maha Ra, which is sort of calm strength. It evokes calm strength. The sound for the solar plexus is Ra or Ram, and it's Maha, grand, royal. So Maha Ra. And we'll be inhaling for 4 and then drawing the hands to the belly with Maha Ra. And what I'd like, I invite you to do is to find an image that for you represents calm strength. It could be from nature or an animal or a face, a deity.
Mm.
And if an image doesn't readily arise, then simply maybe think the words calm strength or courage. There's no way to do this wrong.
Mm.
And because we don't always think of an image. And if the image changes, we're going to do it 3 times, Maha Ra, and then we're going to add something. We're going to do Maha Ya to the heart, and we'll be using Eagle Mudra. So you can use the same image or it can change. So we'll do 3 times to the belly, and just for time, we'll do 1 time to the heart. Okay, Maha Ya.
Great.
So taking a moment to find and maybe allow the eyes to soften or close and find an image that for you represents calm strength. And if an image doesn't readily arise, perhaps a word like courage, and know that the image can change. And we'll be inhaling the arms out in front of the belly. And exhale with Maha Ra. Maha Ra. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. See that image. Draw it in. Maha Ra. And one more time to the belly. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Embrace that image or word. Maha Ra. And then inhale your arms out in front of your heart. See that image, hug it like you're hugging a tree. Draw it to your heart with Maha Ya. And give your heart a little rock. The image or the word on the altar of your heart, there whenever you need it. And then as you're ready, you can allow your eyes to flutter open. Calm strength. There when you need it. So Abaya, what's her name?
Close. Abeja, which is bee in Spanish. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's a little bee. She is just she loves yoga.
Yeah. Well, when in my treatment room, I was working with a client who loves cats, and I don't have Smokey the cat anymore, but I did. And so we would do the chakra sounds as a doorway, a portal into Yoga Nidra at the end. And Smokey curled up and moved up her body with each chakra sound. And when we got to hum for the throat, she curled next to her head, and just stayed there for the whole Yoga Nidra meditation that we did after the sounds. So these sounds, I think our animals really vibrate. They understand the vibration of sounds perhaps better than we do. for sure.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I was trying to concentrate on on an image of visualization, and sometimes things come to me like that, and sometimes, like
Yeah.
you were mentioning, nothing
Mhm.
shows up. But all I can see is this little black kitty, even when I close my eyes, and
Mhm.
she's not exactly the calmest cat. She's got a bit of frenetic energy. So I was thinking about this idea of her as a teacher for me, as a mirror for her showing up when I need that calm energy, like she's reflecting for me what it is I need.
Yeah,
Animals have so much to teach us, right?
they do. They do. And there's, I think it depends on the relationship with the animal, but I know in one of my spiritual teachers would say that it's best when practicing, not so much asana, but meditation, to keep them out of the room so that you
Mhm.
can really, you aren't distracted. You really can go deep to, and on the other hand, there's a kind of relationship, a bond there, and so
Mm,
you're working with that.
yeah.
It's, when I lead this in a group, or individually, I always ask, what came up for you? What was the image? And what's beautiful to hear is how many images come. They're not just generic. They come from people's own lives.
Mm,
Like the swing I used to swing in the backyard of my grandmother's house, or the lake we used to go to when I was a little girl, or the waves, that kind of thing, which is, or nursing my baby when she was
mm,
small and she's now 27,
mm,
those kinds of images. And so that's why I'm not a fan of giving people images, of leading them on journeys, because then it's my imagination, my agenda. So I like to give cues to nature and animals, and to allow people to find their own images for calm strength, or courage, or peace, or love, or whatever it is that they're wanting to bring into their lives. So
yeah.
like this card is for calm strength. It goes to the belly. There are other cards in the deck that are for peace, that kind of thing. Most of the practices are seated, some are standing, but none really require a yoga mat.
Mhm.
They're accessible for everybody.
I so
And
appreciate this beautiful artwork and the time and the energy that you took to put it together and share the practices with us, just a few of them, Amy. I
mhm,
do want to I want to pull on one thread
mhm,
one for one moment, and then I want to give you time to, share any last messages with the audience. But you tapped into something that I think is really important to expound upon, which is the idea of allowing space for you to imagine your own vision. So when you're in meditation, whether it's yoga nidra or you're doing a practice like this, because I have such a visceral experience with being in a yoga nidra training, and one of my co-students was, in a yoga nidra practice, obviously it's a guided meditation. So sometimes there's imagery that comes in, like see a bright moon, see a mountain, see a river stream. And this woman, she was getting really frustrated because she was like, I can't see it. There's something wrong with me. I can't see
mhm,
this thing. Why can't I see it? And so this process of inviting in whatever shows up, and also allowing for maybe no imagery to show up. And
mhm,
what I took away from that also was the different ways that we visualize things. It doesn't always have to be this very strong outlined image of something that we have in our mind. It could be a felt sense, like,
mhm,
okay, what does it feel like to be on top of a mountain? What does it sound like to stand next to a stream? So there's an invitation to see, feel, or sense
mhm.
an
Absolutely.
image, an
Mhm,
experience. And it doesn't have to be one thing. It can be whatever comes up for you, or maybe that's nothing at all. So I
mhm.
just thank you so much for allowing space for that. I think it's important as we get a little bit perfectionist with our yoga practice, I want to do it right. So thank you for saying there's no wrong way to do it. So with all of that said, I want to be mindful of your time. And I also want to allow you space to add something that you feel like you wanted to touch on, that you haven't got to touch on yet. I have so many questions. Like this could go on for 2 hours, but is there any message that you feel strongly about leaving listeners with that you want to share?
Well, first of all, something personal for me, and then, and that is, I was, just from my own story, I was a depressed fiction writer, and none of my novels were published. I had short stories published that won some awards, but basically I had like 6 unpublished novels. And through a devotion to my own well-being, um, and that included, writing yoga for depression and yoga skills for therapists and working with people individually and in groups and training. And then finally stepping back from a lot of the training aspect, I'm not doing as much of that anymore. I was able to come back to fiction, and I published my first novel during the pandemic, Temple Dancer, which is partly set in India during the Raj, so it's partly historical, and partly 2016 during a pilgrimage. So it's fiction, and it's about the Devadasi, the beautiful culture of women who devoted their lives, kind of like geisha, to temple dance and to the deities in the temple. Anyway, I could say more about that, but that's not. So I just really feel that these practices just make more space for us to really live from a place of authenticity. And so the other thing I would say is that even if you don't have a lot of time during the day to roll out a mat and do a practice, take 5 or 10 minutes to do something simple to clear your space, even if it's just a 1 breath per second bellows breath, or to clear the space. And then don't just snap out of it and do something. Take a moment to sense, as we did after we did the breath of joy practice, to sense like you're doing a mini yoga nidra, sense into your face, your hands, your fingertips, to really do a body scan and then ground it like with a grounding breath. That's so important. And then maybe though, you might use it to invite in whatever it is you need to manifest more fully in your life. So if you've done something like bellows breath to clear the space, or any of the other, more energizing cards, take that moment, that clear space that you feel, and invite in whatever essence you need for that day and whatever resonates for you. Maybe a more open heart, maybe a more open mind, maybe a clear mind. Invite it in, because that's where, when the energy, as we align with what is more than our moods, as we clear the space and clear away the story and the mood, we become more aligned with the universe, with the divine, as we know the divine. And in that moment, it's the most precious time to fertilize the seed of your intention.
Mm. Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your practice, your creation. Where can people go to get this deck and find out more about you?
Well, amyweintraub.com is the best place. I have YouTube videos. I have a YouTube channel, Amy Weintraub. I think it's Amy Weintraub author.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I think that. But if you go to amyweintraub.com, it'll link you to YouTube videos and the deck, and and the books and
All the
CD. I have
wonderful
lots
things.
of CDs and DVDs and trainings. I have upcoming trainings that are available for everyone in November and December. I'll be they're hybrids. One is a online training altogether, 3 days, and one is a hybrid that is on site in California and Encinitas, but anyone can tune in. And other places in March, I'll be in various places, but it'll all be on my calendar. So.
Great. And Amy Weintraub is AmYweintraub. Of course, I will include that in the show notes. You'll be able to see how it's spelled, but just for your reference as you're listening, if you want to look it up. All right, Amy, I so appreciate you. Thank you for all the good work that you do and sharing it with us. Take care of yourself. Be well.
Thank you, Tessa. This has been delightful, and I so appreciate you and your yogic wisdom and your big heart. So thank you.
Thank you.